So, Jewher Ilham, you are a Uyghur. You fled China, and actually, you were almost arrested with your father at the airport as you were leaving. And that's the last time you saw your dad. He was taken away serving a life sentence in prison for, I think, being a political dissident. Is that correct? That's what he's been labeled?
Yes, he was labeled as a separatist and someone who advocates for violence and someone who promotes religious extremist thoughts. And they're all false accusations. He's now serving a life sentence in a prison in Urumqi, which is located in the Uyghur region.
So let's go back to that day and tell me about what you remember about that moment. When did that happen and why? What for those folks who don't know, because there hasn't necessarily been a ton of coverage of this issue. Let's talk about what's happening to the Uyghur in China and tell us your specific story dating from that day, the last day you saw your father.
First, I'd like to do a little introduction of who the Uyghurs are. Many people had no clue about who the Uyghurs were and who the Uyghurs are, and they didn't even know that there are Muslim population who are living in China. So the Uyghurs are a Turkic-speaking ethnic minority group who are living in west part of China, and I call the region as the Uyghur region. In Chinese, um, people call it Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. But many Uyghurs don't like the name Xinjiang because of Xinjiang literally means new territory, and it reminds people, the Uyghur people, of this history of being colonized and occupied. Here I will refer to my hometown as the Uyghur region. And the last time I saw my father was February 2nd, 2013. My father was an economics professor in Beijing, in a university in Beijing. My father was invited by Indiana University as a visiting scholar. So he was planning to come to the US in 2013 to stay for a year as a visiting scholar. And it was in China, they call it winter break. Here, they call it Christmas break. And it was my winter break. My father asked me to come along and help him settle down and just to see how America is like. Um, but we couldn't of course he's not here and I'm here all alone. I was 18-year-old. I was a teenager, and my father and I, we were arrested at the airport together, and he was banned from leaving, but uh, as a young teenage girl, I appeared to have no threat to the officials there at the airport, and they allowed me to leave. And that was the last time I saw my father at the airport. My, I didn't want to come to the United States because first I didn't speak any English. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any money. My only purpose to come to the United States was to help my father settle down. So if he wasn't coming, for me, it didn't make sense for me to come here. But my father insisted and pushed me and almost forced me to leave. And I think that was one of the best decisions he had ever made for
Yeah,
me.
you told Ali and Ali on the A Squared podcast, which I have to say was a great interview. And I'm going to put the link to that in the description of this one so that people can go check that out and check out their podcast, because it's amazing that two guys that are in their early 20s are interviewing folks that have such an important story like yourself, whereas many journalists are not talking about this issue. And so kudos to them for bringing this to my attention and bringing your story to my attention too, because I really learned a lot of, well, frankly, terrible things. But one of the most heartbreaking moments of that interview was when you talked about that moment of your father saying to you he would rather you sweep the streets in the United States than stay in China.
Yeah, before he said that sentence, I was saying, why am I leaving you here? And he held my hand and he told me, look around you. Look how this country is treating you. Do you still want to stay here? And he said, I would rather you sweep the street in the United States than you staying here. I know he meant that staying in the US means, staying in China would mean having no freedom, having no future for me. And that's why he would rather me, go leave my family at that point and be across on the other side of the world and come to the United States, because he wanted at least one person in our family to be able to have the freedom that we want to have and that we were not able to get.
What are we seeing here, Jewher?
I believe those prisoners were being transferred from one location to another location, and you can see it was at a train station. So they were loaded on a train, and you can see there are hundreds of them and being transferred. And also, I believe this is not a very unfamiliar scene for the local people, and you can see they were being asked to bend down on their knees and to basically squat on the floor. And these scenes are quite familiar images to me from some of those Holocaust themed movies that I've seen. People were loaded on the trains, transferred from one internment camp to another.
It's amazing too to see each person has an officer. They clearly can't do anything.
Yes.
Their arms are,
they're shut.
Yeah, and they're 1-to-1. There's an incredible amount of, I'll just go back and watch that again. The video just stopped.
The level of surveillance and control, it's incredible. Not only the prisoners, the normal people who are just living their lives, and they are also under massive surveillance and control. And you can see that these those prisoners are watched one by one. And imagine also the other people who are just living in their apartments. They have cameras in each apartment unit, and they have outside of their unit, and they have those QR code that they have to scan every time when they exit and enter their own apartment. And those it's just like going to a Zara store. So any police officers or like plainclothes police officers that can just scan and those codes and know how much electricity you're using, how much water you're using, when was the last time you exited your place, when was the last time you entered your place. Basically, there's no privacy and no freedom for people, for the Uyghur people in the Uyghur region at all. And for the situation for those political or for those prisoners are even worse. I have personally interviewed many camp survivors or family members of former detainees, and they have all testified or talked about very similar elements. For example, including women and men, both female and male prisoners, they have their head shaved. Not sure for what reason. I assume it's for people to collect and make wigs so they can sell to across the globe. And we do know, I'm not sure if you have heard of, in last year, the US border had confiscated 80 was it tons of packages of wigs from the Uyghur region. And I believe those hair was shaved for this purposes. There might be other reasons for why their hair are being shaved, but unfortunately, I don't know. I also know beards are not allowed, wearing scarves are not allowed, and wearing the traditional long costumes or the long what is it called, the abaya. I'm not sure what's the English name for it. For usually Muslim women would wear very long dress, and those are not allowed in some cities. And I have also seen pictures that were posted on the internet, many photos, that on the streets women would have their dresses cut too short just on the streets, and it was recorded and captured, and it was spread on the internet. And I personally, I have no problem with wearing short skirts, but I definitely have a very much problem with someone trying to cut my dress in front of, on the streets or anywhere.
So one thing I learned listening to your prior interview that I brought up is the role of modesty for especially the Uyghur Muslims, which many of the Uyghur, you say, are Muslim, not all of them are. and that part of these tactics are because of the embarrassment that and the shame that brings. Like, can you tell us, these are horrific stories, I just should forewarn people as we start talking about them. You were saying something about how one of the tactics used in these prisons or education camps is making the women stand completely naked. They're raped. And besides just the physical violence of it, there's great shame.
From the testimonies that I have gathered, I believe it's true. I have received or heard many from different detainees that had testified saying that they were forced to watch other women being abused in front of them. And
When you say
if
abused, what do
they,
you mean, Jewher?
it could be beaten, could be touching private parts, or even rape. Those people, those prisoners would be forced to watch, and if they appear to have felt sad or anger on their face, and those people who appear to have those emotions will get picked out of the audience, or what do we call, I'm not sure what's called in English. They get picked out and then get tortured as well. So you will have to appear like you don't care.
What are you hearing
Instead,
from the prisoners about what the purpose of that is? Why would they want them to have no reaction?
it's just my own personal assumption. My own personal assumption is it's to make Uyghur people care less about the other Uyghurs, to make us not unified, to make us have no sympathy for any other Uyghur individuals, to make us be less connected to each other. That's my assumption.
So I haven't been able to nail down a specific date on when all of this began. When did China's government turn its attention to the Uyghur people?
It is very difficult to know the exact numbers, but from estimated by experts and researchers, the numbers that I have is over 1 to 1.8 million Uyghurs have been through the vocational camps, the re-education camps, the prison camps. And also, according to the Chinese government's released white paper, it was released by the Chinese government, and um, in the white paper, it was stated that each year there are 1.27 million Uyghurs have been going through vocational training. That's from their own data. And as for the timeline, the mass number of when people realized people have been disappearing was around 2017, but the persecution for the Uyghur people by the Chinese government has started way, way, way before that. My father was arrested in 2014, and my family has been going through injustice since 2009, 2010. We were forced to be we were put under house arrest multiple times. I grew up having bugging devices in my living room, and I would be picked up from my school and sent to a suburb of Beijing and get locked up in a hotel room with my family without phones for a month. Well, I was arrested for a month, but my family was for 3 months. So it was quite common for Uyghurs, but since 2017, it had became the situation had gone way down, even more down, severe, and it's just I my father told me, I remember before he was arrested, he was even excited about the new president Xi Jinping becoming in charge. He was expecting, oh, the situation of the Uyghur people will be better now. Hopefully, hope this new president will be changing and help improve the lives of the Uyghurs. But once he was in charge, and then there were new government officials were elected to be in charge of the Uyghur region, and the situation has just gone downhill, and Uyghur lives have no longer be cared by anyone, and our sisters, brothers, our relatives, our friends, they're just being tortured, their rights have been being abused. I have several members of in my family have been through the camp or prison, and some of them, they are still in prison.
I want to talk a little bit more about what they've told you about what happens there. I am showing people an article. This is from CNN. You referenced this earlier about the hair that was seized, and the title of this article is 13-ton shipment of human hair, likely from Chinese prisoners, seized. 13 tons of hair. That's hair does not weigh that much. So to have 13 tons of human hair, that's a lot of hair. I'm curious. Also, I saw that some are forced to pick cotton because I didn't know that China is one of the world's largest producers of cotton. So you could be wearing a shirt that is made from cotton picked by these prisoners. You could be wearing a wig that's made from hair from these prisoners. That's why I wanted to tell this story as well, because it's not just drawing the attention to what your people are going through, but how all of us may be connected to it completely unknowingly, and even more need for us to speak out against this, and not just sort of go through our lives thinking that we're not connected to something, like you were saying in that other interview as well, that people think it's just not, it's not happening in my region, or I don't, have a right to talk about it, or I shouldn't talk about it because it's not my country, or whatever else. Even though you and I both disagree with that statement in its own premise, you actually may be connected to the Uyghur with these atrocities. So, just to show people this picture here of the hair that was brought in, and I guess now could you tell us about what you've heard about what happens when people are taken to these camps? And specifically, could you also tell us about the woman who was the mother of the triplets, who went from Egypt to visit her family, and what happened to her?
Yes. Before we go on to that, I just wanted to encore what you just said. There's an enormous risk, and in the entire apparel industry, in almost any industry, because the world is heavily relying on China in all sorts of ways, and especially the apparel industry is implicated in this crisis heavily, because of more than 22% of the world cotton production comes from the Uyghur region, and every brand is potentially implicated. And that is why that as long as you are wearing a piece of clothing, then there's a big, a possibility. Let's just do a simple math. 22% of the world cotton production, that's 1 out of 5 garment industry that is entering the US that is implicated in the forced labor, in the Uyghur forced labor. And that means there's a pretty big risk that we're wearing something. Maybe I'm wearing something that has been made by my cousin or someone from my family, or a friend who are in a labor factory right now, and it's really concerning. Sorry that I distracted you. I just wanted to emphasize, because it's such an important point that I wanted to bring up to people.
Not a distraction.
It's really,
no, it's good. Please tell us more about how, if there's a way to try to avoid this. I mean, I tell people, as much as you can, know the supply chain. So do you suggest that people say, try to buy clothes that are where cotton comes from the United States? Or, I mean, what are your recommendations? And maybe you could, after this interview, send me some links so we can put those in the description as well. Let's just assume that we're going to do that. So people, if you're watching this, go to the description and check out the links, and Jewher will give us some information about how we can do better. But yeah, please tell us more about that, because that's how we can, those of us who feel very powerless in these situations, that's how we can start to make a difference.
The only way that we can ensure those, like, brands, well, since okay, I have to back up a little bit. So how due diligence work in China, it's completely different from the rest of the world because of the heavy surveillance that we briefly talked about earlier. And simply due diligence or monitoring if the item is made of forced labor in China, it's just impossible, since you just don't have access to it. You don't have, there's no transparency. And the only way that we can ensure that brands or corporates that are not complicit in forced labor is to completely exit the Uyghur region by having by ending relationship with suppliers located within the Uyghur region, or ending relationship with major textile companies complicit in Uyghur forced labor, and end relationships with factories participating in forced labor transfer program, since not every clothing are made in the Uyghur region, and the government has been transferring the Uyghur laborers to other regions of China, and also removing all Uyghur region inputs from supply chains. So all these terms, the four terms that the asks that I just mentioned, were part of the call to action, which is the brand commitment to exit the Uyghur region that was brought up by the Coalition to End Uyghur Forced Labor. So this is something that I really recommend people to follow. It's a website called, if people just search End Uyghur Forced Labor, you will be able to pop. It should be the first one on top, and it's a coalition of more than it's a coalition of more than 50, 60 human rights groups who are very concerned about the Uyghur situation, have come together from all around the globe. It's not a US based coalition, and they have proposed this call to action, which endorsed by more than 350 organizations from around the globe. Everyone can endorse it. If you just go on, I think there's a section, it's home and statement and call to action. If people can go in and you can look at the terms. So you can also find which brands have already committed to this call to action, had agreed to cease their action in the Uyghur region and stop being complicit and chose to be ethical. You can also see what are the brands who have been confirmed, who are still being complicit, who chose to be complicit. There are brands are listed in this website. I really recommend people to check it out. You can also see from the related actions section of where you can find what has been done on this matter and what other activities, actions, items that you can take. It's a really good website that I recommend people to see.
I'm showing it right now, Jewher. So it's enduyghurforcedlabor.org. Labor spelled
Yes.
O-U-R. So that's a British way of spelling it, I believe. But yes, you're right. It shows some photos, and 84% of cotton production from China comes from the Uyghur region. 20% of the world's cotton comes from the Uyghur region. Cotton, 1 in 5. Yep. Cotton garments in the global apparel market are tainted by forced labor. And I'm just trying to scroll down to see where, because I did see that about the brands.
Oh, I think if you need to go on top. Sorry, I can't see your screen right now. So if you go top and you see the brands, I think you'll be able to find which brands have committed.
Okay.
And
here we go. So coalition members concentrating their advocacy efforts on the following companies that have not yet taken all credible steps outlined in the call to action. And there's a very long list. Just to name a few: Abercrombie and Fitch, Adidas, Amazon private labels, nice. American Eagle, Anta Sports, Burberry, Burlington Stores, Capri Holdings, which is Michael Kors, Versace, Jimmy Choo, Chanel, Costco, Esprit, Foot Locker, Fast Retailing, which is Theory, Helmut Lang, Uniqlo, J Brand, Comptoir, GU, Princess Tam Tam, if I'm saying, Guess. I'm not going to read them all, but I'll just read some of the big ones. Gap, Old Navy, Banana Republic. We haven't talked to these companies. I don't know what they would say, and we're all complicit really with our ignorance too when we buy. So like we all need to do our own part. But that said, it's mind-boggling to me that a lot of these big brands will go on these advertising campaigns about how virtuous they are, and then there are these sort of dirty secrets happening in the background that maybe they could actually take some action on, and for whatever reason are not. And the environment was something that I covered for quite a while as a reporter when I was in the TV news business. And we all knew very well that the fashion industry was actually, next to oil, is the second worst polluter of any industry. Yeah. And so there's a lot that people can do by just changing the way that they dress, because everybody asks a lot, like, what can I do? What can I do with these big problems? We often think too big, I think, and then we get overwhelmed. We don't think about the little things that we do day in and day out. What do we eat? What do we wear?
Earlier, you mentioned that since people haven't reached out to these brands, I wanted to note that the coalition did reach out to all these brands that are listed on this website. That they have been reached out to. Some of them refused to put an action. Some of them ignored. Some of them maybe hesitating. So, but one thing that I'm sure is that they have all been reached out to, and they were asked to sign the call to action and make this brand commitment. And I really encourage people to, I know it's very difficult to avoid. I know I'm a big shopper. I love fashion so much. It's one of my biggest hobby, and so I know how hard it is to avoid shopping from Zara. It's very difficult. When I learned about that, they lied about on their database. They lied that they cut their ties with Lutai, but Lutai, it's one of the Chinese company that was mainly involved in forced labor, and Zara lied that they said they cut up their ties. And it was really hard on me because I was a big shopper on Zara in the past, and now I have stopped shopping on Zara. I of course I'm not asking for people to boycott on all those things that are made in China, but I do encourage people to start shopping on more on those brands that chose to be ethical, to reward them, such as Island Fisher, Reformation, Marks and Spencer. There will be a few other brands who be listed on this website soon. They have committed but hasn't gone public yet, and I really encourage people to shop from those websites to encourage, and tell people what's the right thing to do. Tell those brands you can be ethical. It is hard, but it's feasible. I just wanted to emphasize this.
No, that's good. And I went back to the website too. You mentioned them again, but just to reread it: Eileen Fisher, Reformation, Marks and Spencer.
I really encourage people to follow this website and also endorse the call to action. Even though you are not a business owner or from an organization, you can still endorse it as an individual, so you can get monthly updates from this website from how people are doing. So I really recommend. I think it's a good website, and I think they're doing a wonderful job. And yeah.
Well, no, you're good. You're good.
So distracted.
No, I appreciate that. And again, just make sure everybody knows the link for that will be in the description of the video. So, and along with more, because other stuff maybe you want to send me later, because I also wanted to talk about the leaked documents, these papers. But before we get to that, why don't we go back to, I would love for you to tell that story. I literally cried when you told that story about the Egyptian, the woman who had married the Egyptian man and was living in Egypt, but she wanted to bring her 3 children. She had just had triplets back to the Uyghur region.
Mehragul Tursun, it's the lady's name, and she's an Uyghur woman, and she lived in Egypt. She had her master's degree, of a well-educated woman, and she had her triplets. And because in our culture, whenever you have kids, you're supposed to show to your parents, which like the grandparents, to see the grandchildren. So she wanted to bring her children to see their grandparents. Sorry, the family line is a little messed up. My English is not cooperating today.
By the way, just as a side note to everybody, Jewher's English is amazing. We should just give her a hands up for that one, because seriously, you speak like 5 languages, and you say, "Oh, my English is not that good." Trust me, your English is amazing. So do not apologize.
Thank you. But she arrived with her triplets, and I'm not quite sure of the location. I believe it's Urumqi, but I'm not quite sure. She arrived in the Uyghur region, and she was arrested at the airport. According to her our interview, she mentioned that after she arrived, she was put on a black sack. Is it what?
Yeah, a hood, basically. Real fast though, how do they know? How did they know you're at the airport and they come to arrest you? How did they know this woman was coming into the airport? That to me is unreal.
Because you look Uyghur. Because of the look. So the Uyghur people looks different from the Han Chinese people, and our birth certificate also can distinguish if you're Uyghur or not. So our IDs tells if you're Han Chinese or Uyghur or other ethnic minorities. Also, you look
Okay.
different. The moment they see your face, they spotted you. Oh, you're Uyghur. You're traveling from overseas. Oh, you're traveling from Egypt, an Islamic
I see.
country. Okay, you are an Islamic extremist now.
Okay.
And that's how
So she's detained
she was
basically. She's like
arrested.
going through customs or something like that. They detain her and then they arrest her. They put a hood
Yes.
over her head
Yes, and shackled her, and she was
with her three kids,
detained
who were
for.
how old at the time?
I believe they're only a few months old at that time. They were only a few months old.
And they just take the kids
Um,
right there and shackle her and put a hood over her head.
I think so. I think that's what I from what I remembered. I think that was what happened. But people, for more detailed information, please find her full testimony. I believe you can find it on if you type in her name Mihrgu
We'll put
Tursun.
that
You will
we'll put
be.
that link in the description too. I'll make sure we
Yes,
get that in
yes.
there.
Just in case I
Okay.
am, because my memory is bad. I have a memory of a fish. Sometimes I could misremember some details or like some numbers or dates. So please, for exact information, please find through her own testimony. But from what I remembered, she was shackled and put on a black hood on her head, and she was arrested. I believe she was arrested for 9 months. And if the numbers were different in the website, it's not because I'm lying, it's because I just simply can't remember the exact dates. So her head was shaved, she was beaten, um, tortured, she was fed with unknown medicine. The reason why we said unknown medicine was because she really didn't know what the medicine was for. But after consuming the medicine, it was white pills, according to her, and that. Oh, by the way, for the only time she was allowed to drink water was the time when she was fed for the medicine. Other than that, she wasn't allowed to even have water. And she would get that medicine, and she said she felt weak around her body, and then she sometimes would get white foam come out of her mouth, and she would have started having illusions.
You
And
also said
until
too that
today,
other detainees had said something about how that was the only time they were getting water was when they would have to take this whatever this medicine was, and that sometimes the water was just dirty, but they would drink it anyway because they were so
yes,
thirsty.
they look milky even. It's not even clean water. They even look milky. Like because when she testified in Uyghur language. So I think the best word to translate it will be milky because it looks a little white, grayish, and almost not transparent. So it was dirty water at the first place. And the food they were given was not even fresh food. They were given uh the steamed buns, that it's a typical Chinese food. It's like a bread thingy. The ones that she was given was almost what is it called? Almost rotten,
Mm-hmm.
like going for so many days that it became so hard
Okay.
to eat. So it's almost impossible to swallow it without
Oh.
water.
What were they
And
given? Anything to drink at all?
sometimes for breakfast they would have porridge, rice porridge, but almost has no rice in it. So it's like a water has few spoons of rice in it. That's it. Oftentimes she says she just goes so hungry, so starving, and they have no enough nutrients, and they're not allowed to. They have a like what is it called? Almost like a trash can. Almost looks like a trash can in their prison cell where they go to bathroom. There's no bathroom. They just go do in
What do
front
they
of
sleep on?
people. Grounds, and they don't have a bed. And so according to her, there are over 30 to 40 inmates in each prison cell. Very small. I don't know how to describe the size of it, but according to her, a lot of times that they have to sleep line up to each other, but still 10 to 20 of them needs to stand against the wall for hours, so they would take turns to sleep because they don't have enough space.
Okay.
And
To
this,
Jewher, that's just, I just don't even know what to say about all this, and that's not even the worst of it, because I'm sure you're gonna get to even more terrible things. But just before I forget, the pill reminded me of how I had read as well about forced sterilization.
yes, many women, female prisoners or former detainees have testified that they were not able to get pregnant. They were sterilized. And some of them were forced to get unknown injections or medicines. They didn't know what that was, but later, come after exiting the country, they realized they can no longer have children again. Um, I don't have children, and I am not married, but in the future, I would love to become a mother. And I can't imagine the pain of having that taken away from me. It will be definitely everybody's choice if they want to have or not have children. It should be everyone's individual choice. That choice should not be taken
No.
away by anyone
No.
else.
Well, and it is one of those things too where I feel like now that I'm a mom, it does bring on a whole nother level of heartache hearing these stories. And that's probably also why hearing this woman's story about having her kids taken away from her and then what ended up happening later, which I'd love for you to continue. I'm sorry to cut
Yeah.
you off. There's just so much. It's just, it is it is paradigm shifting for me to hear about all of this stuff, especially since it really is not a conversation that many people are aware of to be happening right now, where we have 24-hour news cycles, where stations are on 24 hours on television, and how many of the minutes of these 24 hours a day of live news is talking about this issue.
Some Uyghurs are even feeling grateful for the amount of attention we have now, because 2 years ago we were having no attention from the international world. We have been screaming for help from the international community. We have been screaming, yelling, shouting for help, and there was no attention at all. And people were calling us liars. People were calling us all sorts of things. I had constantly um, threatening messages in my inbox, and all kinds of things. And this is Uyghur people's daily life. And even though for me, I have been fighting for my family's freedom for the past 7 years, and so many Uyghur people have been trying for the past 3 to 4 years, and some of them even for like decades. And it's still, things are not changing. That's why we need more and more people paying attention to this. What we have now, it's not enough. It is not enough. It is growing. I have been seeing some great momentums, and then like the passing of the WRO, the regional withhold order, and this the CBP had banned the cottons and tomatoes from the Uyghur region. Those are great, but it's not enough until every innocent Uyghurs are freed, until every innocent Uyghurs have their rights granted to them again. So I really, really, really hope people can, continue pay attention to this
Yeah,
matter, to this
me
issue.
too. I hope you are on, more YouTube channels at the very least, but I hope you're telling your story, to bigger outlets. Real fast, Human Rights Watch had this article from November 1st of last year. Chinese diplomats try using UN as a shield. And they say here, they're in a letter to the editor in The Economist, a senior Chinese diplomat in London suggested that his government's policies follow, quote, principles embodied in a number of international documents on counterterrorism, such as the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. And then the article says, but at the risk of stating the obvious, no UN counterterrorism principle would ever countenance the surveillance, family separation, mass arbitrary detention, and forcible political re-education of millions of people, as in the case of, and they say Xinjiang. I know I'm not saying that right, but you said that's what the region is called, as like the Chinese call it, or the government calls it that, but you call it the Uyghur region.
Lots of Uyghur people have a very negative feeling of the word Xinjiang, which is Xinjiang. That means it literally means new territory. and that reminds the Uyghurs of how it was occupied and how people were, tortured and butchered. So many Uyghur people have lots of very, very negative feelings of this specific term. That's why we prefer to call it in different names. And I personally call my hometown as the Uyghur region. That's how I call it. But people, it's, they have the freedom to call whatever they wish to. The Xinjiang, it's what it's officially called in Chinese. And I personally would avoid using this term, since it really, especially this few years, it really hurts us, and it hurts us even more and more every day whenever we see what is happening to our, friends, family, and people that we know, that we love. Before we this happens to me a lot, because there's so many, as you said, there's so many
Right.
things that is happening, all are so bad. And that's what happened to me. I always try to, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that, and I don't think it's enough to I just feel like I'm not telling people enough of the information, so I always get distracted. I'm all over the places. I wanted to get back to Mihra Gulchursun's story really
Yes.
quick. um let alone what happened to her in the prison. There were more things, more severe things, even severe things that hurt her even more than what she'd been through inside the camp. That was the loss of her child. Remember when I mentioned that she brought her triplets back to the Uyghur region? After 9 months of detention, she was released, and she was asked to put on makeup and put on a hijab, and asked to film a video by the police and the prison
she's
that
not
she
asked,
was at.
she's told. Okay, right? She's not like she could
Yes, she
say,
was
no, I
told.
don't want to,
Yes.
thank you, I'd like to go on my merry way.
Yes.
Right.
Well, yeah, there's no choice
Right.
for that. The only way for her to get out of there was to film that video. She was asked to film that I was never tortured here. I lived a good life. I was able to do this and this and that. And I never been through anything negative. Something, similar content like this way. I'm not sure the exact wording, but the general idea was this. And then she was sent to the hospital. That's where she was told that where her children were. And she was, this is the most difficult part for me, and it's also, I really need people to know about it, that she was handed a cold body of one of her babies.
The child was dead.
The child was dead with a scar around the neck, and she wasn't allowed to ask what happened to the baby, how did it happen, why did it happen, and she wasn't allowed to question anything. She burst into tears. Yeah. She was almost having a, was it called seizure? When I was interviewing her, I just told her, you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me. And she was holding my hands, shaking at that time. And I can imagine how hard it is for her to repeat this story, to people like me, to everyone. But she needed to get this out, and she told me this is the least she could do to her, for her children, and for her child who died.
And she still has no idea
hurt.
what happened. Her kids, she had 3 kids that were just taken away. She goes to pick them up at a hospital. She doesn't know where they've been for these many months that she was away. She just picks them up there. Were they at the hospital this whole time? She doesn't know, right? And then she's not even allowed to ask what is this scar? What happened? I can't even comprehend the kind of trauma that leaves with somebody.
I have 2 younger brothers. We have one of them was 12 years apart, 12 years difference, and the other one was 15 years younger than me. And we have this huge age gap. I took care of the older one myself until he was 2. So I never had children of myself, but just thinking of losing my brother almost killed me. And I had nightmares about it. And being away from him, they're both in China right now, being away from them, not being able to communicate with them already hurt me so bad. And imagine her, what she is feeling now. She can never see her baby again, and she can never hear the baby cry or scream or talk or smile or laugh again. And whenever I think about that, I can't help myself from imagining what if it was my baby, if I had a baby, what if it was me? And it hurts so bad. And this should not be allowed to be happening.
No.
This should not be allowed to happen in any community, any religious groups, any country. Doesn't matter to women or men. It should not be happening. Period. It should not be allowed. And I really want to get her story out. And she's not the only one who had experienced similar traumatic experiences. There are other women who had been through so much in those camps, in those prisons, in those labor factories, whatever you call it. And we need to get those people's stories out, and we need to end it. We need to prevent from more people suffering from similar experiences. We should stop this from happening to, doesn't matter if it's Uyghur or Kazakh or anyone. It should not be happening. It should not be happening.
No, it shouldn't be. And I know you stay very strong when you're talking about all of this. And we haven't even talked much about your own family and how you're hearing these stories of these people who have suffered this great pain. And you have your own father and other family members who are detained. Now, I'm curious, is your dad's location or is he in the same area where these other prisoners are? And I know you said, I don't know, is his case similar or different in any way for why he was taken versus what the reasons are given for the others?
Well, for my father, it was a very different case. He was arrested officially in 2014. He was one of the very few detainees, who was arrested by the government. In the beginning, the government only arrested people who had a voice, who was trying to defend the Uyghurs, or who were trying to, to raise the issue of that there are injustice among the Han Chinese group and the Uyghur groups. Why is this happening to the Uyghurs? Why there's no job opportunities? Why there's no equal education system? Why is this? Why the discrimination? What is that? And my father was one of them. He was one of the one who has the loudest voice, and he created a website called UyghurBiz.org. It was actually recently being restored by some volunteers, and so people can still have access to his website. And he created this website for people to share ideas, to get to know each other and create understandings, because among Han Chinese groups, they have this very negative stereotypes towards the Uyghur people. They think of Uyghur people are non-educated, religious nomads, or all kinds of negative things. And my father wanted to change that, since the Uyghur region is so far away from mainland China. There's no way for other Han Chinese people to know about who the Uyghurs really are, and why there are so many social economical issues in the region. And that captured government's attention. My father reached out to government officials and proposed ideas and solutions on how to develop the region. Instead of working with a scholar like my father, they considered my father as someone who was trying to challenge the authorities' power. And that's completely different from what my father was trying to do. He was trying to help. He was trying to fix the problem, since he was always a fixer. Whenever he sees a problem, he thinks he needs to fix it. And he was a professor. He thinks if you make a mistake, we need to fix it, and we make you do better. And the government didn't work with him and put him in prison. Before putting him in prison, he was threatened. They were trying to ram to my family's car, tried to create a car accident, and follow us to everywhere, wherever we meet, whoever we meet, and bug our phones, and put a bugging device in our living room, and have police visits almost every day, all kinds of stuff, and preventing my brothers from going to school, etc. But it didn't stop my father from continuing advocating for Uyghur people's rights, and that even pissed the government off even more. And eventually, it led him to be officially arrested, and he was given a life sentence.
I want to ask you, how are you doing? You're now in the United States. Um, I'm assuming that now here you're safe here. I'm hoping you're safe here. But you still must constantly think about your family, your father back home. How do you? I mean, how are you doing?
I mean, I don't know if should answer I am doing okay or not okay, because physically I am eating, I'm sleeping, I'm doing okay. But deep inside, for every Uyghur person that is in the diaspora, there's something broken inside us. We're missing something, missing a piece inside us. And that is our families. And that is what we're missing, is to knowing that our family members are doing okay. That's what we're missing. And that makes us not okay.
And none of the answers that the government gives, I'm sure, make any difference, in trying to, because it doesn't even seem like they make any sense. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm showing people, this is an article from the New York Times from November 16, 2019. Files expose how China organized mass detentions of Muslims. And there are all these documents, which of course I can't read. But so here's like one of them. They're in a training school set up by the government. The prescribed answer began. If pressed, officials were to tell students that their relatives were not criminals yet could not leave these schools. The question and answer script also included a barely concealed threat. Students were to be told that their behavior could either shorten or extend the detention of their relatives. I'm sure that you will support them because this is for their own good, officials were advised to say, and also for your own good. So are they talking about college students? Students book their tickets home at the end of the semester, hoping for a relaxing break after exams. Summer of happy reunions with family in China's far west. Soon they would be told their parents were gone, relatives had vanished, neighbors were missing, all of them locked up in an expanding network of detention camps built to hold Muslim ethnic minorities. So basically, the leadership distributed a classified directive advising local officials to corner returning students as they arrived and keep them quiet, including a chillingly bureaucratic guide for how to handle their anguished questions, beginning with the most obvious, where is my family? So this is a basically disinformation campaign run by the government for students that are going back to the home region, and this is what they're being told. Are these students buying any of this? I mean, it's just, I'm looking at all of these documents and from hearing what you've said, and I'm sure, are they just like, screw you? Are you kidding me? I'm not gonna, I mean, what is the reaction to that?
Do you think you're allowed to say screw
no,
you to
in
them?
your head.
Do you think you are allowed to question?
No, I know. But in their heads, are they just thinking, yeah.
Sure. The entire region, it's almost like it's in a bubble that we can possibly see a little from the outside, but you can't really enter it. And the inside people can't really reach out to the other side either. And just so limited information, and for them reaching out to outsiders like me or like you, it could give them a death penalty. It means like almost like giving them a death penalty or some like excuse for the government to charge them as a religious extremism or some separatist.
So it's possible that these students do think this is what's going on. That it's for.
There's a possibility, but I mean, it's a matter of time. I'm sure once seeing how their family, was treated, they will know what actually happened. But you can't really publicly question it or talk about it, since you can't really trust your phone. You can't really trust the camera or anything in your apartment. Who knows what's in there? And you just can't trust anything anymore. There's just, the Chinese government said it's to create a peaceful society, but is there really peace in everybody's heart now? I wonder that.
No, it's so, like, obviously the government is not just running this internally to try to message what they want people to think is going on, but they're running external communications too, right? To other governments. Oh, don't look here. There's nothing going on. You went and spoke at the UN to talk about this issue. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what that was like and what was the response?
I was a bit disappointed with that UN General Assembly meeting that I was at. I was expecting a lot more. In that, I remember in that year's 2019's, that was its October or September for that UN General Assembly. Everyone's attention was on environment, which is very important. I agree. But for me, it's just like protein and vitamins. They're both very important for my body. You cannot live with only one thing, only having vitamins in your body for the rest of your life. You have to have all of them to be able to be healthy. And for a healthy society, you have to care about all aspects of the social issues and all kinds of issues. Many times, whenever some influencers or some politicians said, "Oh, let's care about this issue," I always see thousands of comments underneath said, "What about this issue? What about that issue?" Of course, they're all important. Nobody has said this one is more important than the other one. They're all equally important, and they all need to be addressed and needs to be fixed. And in that event, I thought that the Uyghur situation, the event was almost ignored. There were it was picked up very, very maybe by one media or two media outlet, but everything was about the other issues, the environmental issue, and in that UN General Assembly meeting. I was sad. I do care about the environment. I do think it's a very important matter to talk about. But I was also, as a selfish Uyghur girl, I was very sad that the Uyghur issue for that meeting was completely ignored and was almost not addressed in most of the media outlets.
Is there anything else related to what's happening there right now that you want to make sure people hear? What's happening in the prisons? What's happening to people who are facing the possibility of it or who are speaking out about it? You know, are how long are people usually kept? Do they die there?
The situation varies. Some more well-known or elites of the Uyghurs usually tend to get locked up longer. For instance, people like my dad, who are scholars, and they get sometimes 10 years, 20 years, or life sentence. For instance, the president of Xinjiang University and Tashbulat Tayyip or Yalqun Rozi, a well-known publisher, or sorry, my brain is frozen right now. Rahila Dawood, a well-known anthropologist, very well-known. She has been disappeared, and there are so many. Sometimes the more well-known you are, the more well, technically, the higher status you have among the Uyghur community, the more severe of treatment you can get, which is very ironic from what the government is claiming, that those treatments they have is to develop the region to it's a poverty alleviation program, which is very opposite from what they're saying. And the situation really varies. Some people can graduate from those so-called re-education centers within 6 months, some 2 years, some I don't know how long they might have to be transferred to a prison or to a factory. Even they're released from those centers, from those camps, they are transferred to a labor programs where they have to be sent to different regions of China, like Guangdong, Shenzhen, Shandong, to work in factories with very low payment or even no payment, with over time working hours. So it really varies, and I really do recommend people to follow that website that I brought up earlier, and UyghurForcedLabor.org, where you can find all sorts of information about the forced labor forced labor issues, the and testimonies of or webinars of that has testimonies of the Uyghur victims or Kazakh victims, where you can find all kinds of information, and you can get updated on what kind of positive momentums have been built. I really do recommend people. Oh, I also would like to mention about the film that I have been working on before I forget. So most as from this past more than 1 hour, you can see I've been throwing up lots of information, and people might get their heads messed up and feel dizzy about it. I have been working on a documentary film for almost 2 years with a group of award-winning directors, filmmakers, and this documentary film will one of the storyline is the Uyghur storyline, the Uyghur crisis, and we will have a collection of the testimonies that I have talked about earlier with Mehrgul Tursun and also Tashpolat Tayyip's brother, and all kinds of other information will be in it. It will include my family's story as well, and we'll be generally talking about. Also, we will have our team had flew to many countries to interview camp survivors. We have people from Kazakhstan, from Turkey, from Europe, from the United States. Our production team even flew to China. I didn't go. I couldn't, of course. But they sneaked into China, even to the Uyghur region, and got some pretty interesting information and footages. So I'm really looking forward to share this film with everyone, and please stay tuned. And also, we're trying to wrap up this film, and we're lacking a little bit more of funds and to work on the post-production, and if people can check it out on my social media handles, and you can just type in my name, Jewher Ilham. You'll be able to find the link to the donation link.
I'll make sure that we put that in the description of the video too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you.
One last question is how you had been talking about the Ali and Ali, they had asked about these re-education I'm not talking specifically about the camps, but the brainwashing, essentially, this re-education, the brainwashing, what is it exactly that they're trying to achieve, and is it working? They had asked that, which I thought was actually quite an astute question for a 23-year-old or whatever they are because it did bring up a very interesting answer on your end, which was that some people are saying, yeah, it's just for their own good, and just helping not be so extreme, and I think the reason that I'm interested in hearing you talk a little bit about that is because whatever country you're in, you can hear your government say, we're doing this for your own good when it comes to civil rights being taken away, and I just think it's important to pay attention to that framing, because we may end up wherever we are scared, whether it's propaganda that's pushed by the government or through the media or whatever it is. And when we're very scared, or we've been taught to be afraid of this person or that person, then we look to the government, for instance, to take care of us and to save us from those people, and we hand over freedoms in the process. So tell me a little bit about that the reaction that people have had to this re-education, and when you hear people say, but hey, it's for our own good, what do you think when you hear that?
I have heard reaction like this, and mostly people who had not directly been through it. It was a reaction from them, and I have told one of my Chinese friend about this, and she was in the United States. She went to a very prestigious school and from a very good family background. She's very kind, very smart, And I told her, she was very supportive of my fight for my father. And she didn't know about the concentration camp, the re-education camp, this whole scheme in China. And after I told her, she looked at me and said, Jewher, I feel so bad for you. And I thought she was going to say, I feel so bad for your Uyghur community. She said, you're so brainwashed. And she thought that I was brainwashed by Western media. And I told her, I am firsthand experiencing it. My family members are experiencing it. And she was in denial mode.
Wow.
She thinks, she's like, no, it's not true. There's no way. And after providing with her lots of evidence, she got quiet. Later on, she said, okay, yes, maybe it is happening, but maybe it's for your own good. They might have good intentions, but it just applied in a little bit harsh way. A little bit.
Yeah.
And I also heard from Uyghurs that I personally know, said, who never personally experienced it because they live inside in the mainland city instead of the Uyghur region. And the person said, it will become good. In order to reach to the goodness, you will always have to go through the hardship, and it's for our own good. And for this person who said that, this person only has access to the Chinese state media, state-backed media, and this person has no access to any other sort of information beside the CCTV, which is the Chinese-styled New York Times, and which is the only channel that is allowed to be on TV by the Chinese government. I think well, at least 8 years ago that was the case. I don't know about now if they allow any other media to be on TV, but everything is censored, and all the information she had access to was what the government told her. And I think I understood why she thought like that, because before coming to the US, I believed in everything that the news told me. And there was not like in the US, you have Fox News and New York Times or CNN that holds totally different opinions, that have totally different angles on one same story. In China, there's only one voice. You're not allowed to have more than one voice. But in my perspective, a normal society does not have only one voice.
Yeah.
This is just simply not normal. And I understand why some people would be so brainwashed and think it is okay to be treated like this way. I can understand where they're coming from, or maybe they are in denial mode, that they don't want to admit that they are the victim and they're going through this. It could be all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, it could be. And it's something that you even see in a country like the United States, where there are options for finding information. Even here, people, it's like you hear these calls for shutting down voices, and then I hear your story, and I'm just, well, I've always said this, but I say it on my channel a lot, which is, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about getting the word out, because even in a country where we think we have all this freedom, there is this encroachment I'm watching happening when it comes to speech suppression, and in the name of it's for your own good, that those voices are harmful, they're dangerous. And you can see how slowly it creeps to voices that maybe the government just doesn't want you to hear, and how the power structure can combine to keep us, even in a country like the United States, where we think, oh no, we have all the information at our fingertips, we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Your story is, I hope, a stark reminder to people that we need to continue being very vigilant about our access to information, and not just hand over our trust to a very powerful structure, whether it's big corporations that run the tech companies, or it's the government itself, that things like this can happen in other places, and the idea of how important information is to preventing atrocities of human rights.
I honestly just want to tell people that please cherish what you have, because what you have, what you don't even care about, might be something people are dying to get, or who can never dream of getting it. Like the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of getting news, freedom of picking up a phone, calling your mother. Please cherish what you have. This is the last message I really, really want to tell people, that please, everything you have is very valuable, and please cherish what you have.
Jewher Ilham, you are a beautiful soul, and we really, really are honored and grateful, and just it's been very humbling to hear your story, and I'm just so grateful that you're willing to share it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for covering this issue.